a young priestess joins the Adventurers Guild, where she's assigned the lowest rank of porcelain. She's approached by a group of nervous adventurers of the same rank looking for a healer. They ask her for her help clearing out a nearby cave of goblins, which are typically considered low-level monsters. However, the party soon realizes that they've severely underestimated the creatures as they become trapped in a narrow passage by their cheap tricks and brute force tactics. The wizard gets outnumbered. The warrior discovers his sword is too long to fight in tight quarters, and the fighter is quickly overrun without backup. Priestess barely escapes the onslaught, dragging her wounded companion along. A couple of goblins catch up and she's paralyzed by indecision. Is she strong enough to defend her friend, or should she run for her own life? Fortunately, a fully armored adventurer wielding a short sword and shield saves her from certain death. He calls himself Goblin Slayer. His cold decisiveness is exactly what's in order here. The wounded one is a lost cause, and it's time to kill some goblins. Priestess decides the only sensible thing to do is to stay with this guy and try to be useful. He shares some of his encyclopedic knowledge of goblin killing while clearing out the cave. They come upon a small room with a shaman. Priestess uses one of her miracles to blind it, while Goblin Slayer does his thing. They clear out the rest of the goblin nest and head back to the guild. The next time Goblin Slayer accepts a quest, Priestess walks into the guild, wearing chainmail that he suggested she buy. She is ready to slay some goblins. One day, Goblin Slayer carries out his morning routine of checking the perimeter of the farm he lives on. Afterwards, he accompanies his childhood friend Kauga into town. She's got deliveries to make, and he's heading to the Adventurers Guild to find work. At the guild hall, Kyuga overhears other adventurers crack jokes and talk behind his back about his low-quality armor and his tendency to only accept goblin-slaying quests. Despite his silver rank, the woman who runs the counter, Gilga, responsible for doling out quests and rewards alike, appreciates his presence since he takes jobs nobody else wants. Priestess shows up, and he tests her goblin-slaying knowledge while Kawa looks on, surprised he's questing with someone, let alone a young girl. They approach the counter and ask whether there are any quests involving goblins. There are, and he chooses to take on a goblin settlement in an old fortress. Priestess suggests they help an inexperienced party who accepted another goblin job, afraid they'll die, but Goblin Slayer refuses. Defeated, she tags along with him. Goblin Slayer divulges the reason for his fixation. When he was a child, goblins raided his village. His sister was killed as he watched, from beneath the floorboards, powerless to save her. Kawaga's parents also perished during the attack, which is why they now live on her uncle's farm. Traumatized, he had become obsessed with the wholesale extermination of goblins. Back home, Kauga's uncle warns her that Goblin Slayer might be a bit too obsessed. Later, Goblin Slayer and Priestess attack the goblin fortress, setting it alight. She uses her new miracle to cover the exits, preventing the goblins from escaping their fiery death. She's on board with the idea of killing all goblins, but wonders if they have to be so brutal about it. Meanwhile, in another city, a bard sings of the Goblin Slayer's exploits, catching the attention of some passing adventurers who ask him where they can find the hero of his tale. A high elf archer, a dwarf shaman, and a lizard man priest walked into the Adventurers Guild, looking for someone they call Orc Bulk. It takes a few minutes to sort out that they're referring to Goblin Slayer, whose name was lost in translation. And right on cue, he and Priestess waltz into the guild hall. The trio implores him to hear them out. He tells an eager priestess to wait downstairs for him. She's joined by Witch, who claims to be an acquaintance of Goblin Slayer. She understands the priest's decision to pass up partying with other rookies in favor of her new mentor, though warns her to be wary all the same and to remember that she is her own person. Upstairs, the trio explains their mission to fight back against the Demon Lord, who's raising an army after recently being resurrected, but Goblin Slayer cuts them off. If there are no goblins, he doesn't give a flying fuck. Fortunately, goblin activity is ramping up, which is why they saw him out. The little green buggers are the army's cannon fodder, and as soon as they mention this, he accepts the job and is ready to get underway. Back downstairs, Priestess asks him about the job, but Goblin Slayer tells her not to come. Annoyed with his inability to gauge anything on a social level, she calls him out for not even talking to her before making an executive decision. With or without his invitation, she accompanies him. That night, the five of them set up camp and discuss why they became adventurers. They tell stories they've heard about where goblins originally came from. Goblin Slayer regals them with the tale his sister told him, claiming the little ankle biters came from the Green Moon. The party reaches the goblin nest. After dealing with the guards out front, Goblin Slayer confirms the kills and starts covering himself in their blood, telling the others to do the same to mask their scent. They enter the underground structure and eventually come to a fork in the path. The dwarf notes the tracks indicate their hideout is to the left, but Goblin Slayer leads them onto the right, where they find and rescue an elven prisoner. They vow to avenge her and wipe out every last goblin. Back the way they came and onward down the left corridor, it opens into a large circular hall with sleeping goblins littering the floor. To avoid raising an alarm, they cast sleeping spells and begin exterminating the goblins quietly. This sound of heavy footsteps fills the hall, and an ogre appears in the doorway. When Goblin Slayer realizes it's not a goblin, he loses interest, which only serves to infuriate the already bloodthirsty beast. Priestess quickly casts protection to counter the ogre's fireball, saving the entire party. They jump into action and begin their assault, but the ogre proves a formidable foe. Priestess helps Goblin Slayer recover from being swatted away like an insect so he can activate his trump card. He pulls a scroll from his back, and in a flash, the ogre is severed limbless and seawater covers the floor. The gate scroll he used was linked to the bottom of the ocean, which unleashed water under immense pressure when opened up to the world above sea level. Reinforcements arrive, and the group heads back to town. The archer complains that adventuring should be fun, and this was anything but. She expresses her desire to, one day, take them on a proper one. A few days later, Goblin Slayer and Cowgirl head into town to sell her uncle's produce. The elf, dwarf, and lizard man run into him and float the idea of checking out some more ruins, which he says he'll think about to their surprise. Meanwhile, two rookie adventurers search for a new weapon after losing their only sword in the sewers. In the guild hall, Witch gives them a candle that burns hotter the closer you get to whatever you seek. Goblin Slayer drops off some gear at the blacksmith for repairs. He's also looking for a new scroll to replace the one he used against the ogre. The blacksmith promises to keep his eyes open, but doubts he'll come across one anytime soon. At the guild, the two rookies ask for advice. Guild Girl suggests asking Goblin Slayer. They have no money to buy anything, so he tells them it should be easy enough to get their hands on a club, at least until they recover their sword. Before he can leave, which he wants to do, given there are no goblin quests at the moment, Gilga asks a favor of him. She's short-staffed and wants him to sit in as an observer while she conducts a promotion exam. Now, during the exam, she calls out the scout under evaluation for being perhaps a little too well-equipped for his experience. He tries to explain himself, but the other examiner quickly sees through his lies with a spell. He's a low-down dirty thief, is what he is. The scout backpedals and tries to get Goblin Slayer on his side, but no dice. Frustrated, he briefly thinks about attacking Guild Girl, but decides against it, fearing the wrath of Orc Bulk, and he's forced to accept the consequences. Elsewhere, the two rookies equipped with a club and candle fight their way through the giant insects that infest the sewers, and they get the sword back from the belly of the insect that ate the rat that the sword was stuck in. While the other examiner teases Gilga about her crush on Goblin Slayer, he suddenly bursts back into the office with a request specifically for his services from Sword Maiden, a former adventurer turned hero after defeating the Demon Lord 10 years prior. Goblin Slayer announces that he's going to Watertown, and whoever wants to join him is welcomed. The group chews him out on his lack of interpersonal skills and inability to consider others when making decisions, and they have a few conditions. The girls would like him to reduce the extreme brutality of his approach and make him promise not to use fire, water torture, or poison this time. When the party arrives, they head to the Temple of Law. Priestess starts to wonder about who exactly it was that summoned him, only to be dumbfounded when Goblin Slayer casually mentions their employer is the Archbishop of the Supreme God, the Sword Maiden. As soon as they meet her, the first thing out of his mouth is, "I'm here for the goblins." Priestess is mortified at his poor manners and stumbles through a somewhat more formal but fangirlish introduction. Apparently, with increasing frequency, bodies have been found in the streets, showing signs of violence as bodies found on the streets often do. In time, the city's guards thwarted an assault in progress and discovered that the assailant was a goblin, which is why Sword Maiden sent the request. She believes they've set up shop underground in the extensive sewer system the city is built on. She gives the party a map, and they set off to investigate. Searching the sewers, they run into multiple groups of the little creatures. While crossing a bridge, they're attacked by a literal boatload of goblins. The dwarf uses magic to sink the boat with a large boulder. But the surprises keep coming when a giant alligator appears in the water. Using this to their advantage, Priestess casts a miracle that causes its tail to glow, attracting the rest of the goblin fleet to it, and they casually watch and chat as the alligator does the goblin killing for them. Goblin Slayer figures that someone must have shown the goblins how to use the boats, and since they seemed unaware of the alligator, it's likely they were sent there on purpose. That's all for today. Don't forget to like and to subscribe for more videos like it. Thanks for watching.